she's staring at.
Ballblazer. Originally conceived by Lucasfilm Games in 1984, eventually released in 1985 for Atari 8-bit computers, is a one-on-one first-person futuristic sports game of competition where two opposing players control specialized hovercraft called rotofoils, attempt to claim control of the ball in order to score points by getting the ball into their opponent's goal area. Getting the ball into the goal area earns you 1 point, shooting the ball into said goal earns 2 points, and if you somehow manage a blind spot into the goal, you'll earn the coveted 3 points. These points will then fill counters on screen, player 1 on the left and player 2 on the right. Eventually it gets to a point where one player will score enough points that it starts to fill the other player's counter. So it becomes less a matter of scoring more goals and more of a game of tug-of-war, who can fill both score meters before time expires. Expectedly, a round concludes when one player scores 10 points, which means filling both score meters with one color, but a round also ends when time has expired, and whoever scores the most points win. In the event of a draw, the game goes into sudden death with one goal to a finish. Controlling your rotofoil is relatively simple. Use the control stick to move your craft around while the button is reserved for shooting the ball or attempting to wrest possession of the ball from your opponent. There's no turning in Ballblazer, you only move forwards, backwards, and strafe to the left or right. The game has it that you're either always facing the general direction of the ball, and once you gain possession of said ball, you'll always be facing your opponent's goal point. The camera cuts can be jarring, especially if you're on defense, trying to get the ball back. But once you get the hang of things, it's not so bad. And that's really the wonderful thing about Ballblazer. It's nowhere near as complicated as it might seem at first glance. If anything, the game is really simple to grasp, despite the first-person perspective. And it's also really fun to play, especially with a second player. Barring that, the game does give you 9 different skill levels to test your skills, or you could pit 2 computer opponents against each other, sit back and watch the action unfold. You could also set the round's time limit from 1 minute to 9, and that's about the extent of options with Ballblazer, and really that's all you need. There's no reason to overcomplicate things when something this simple works just fine. Right off the bat, the outstanding point to Ballblazer are the visuals and its incredibly smooth scrolling and scaling. The first-person viewpoint on both players works exceptionally well here. The frame rate is silky smooth, the scaling of the ball, the opposing rotofoil, the edges of the playfield, they all scale smoothly with virtually no choppiness or awkwardness as you're blazing along the playfield. The actual vehicles are simple looking, but they can afford to be, and the chessboard-like board is simple enough to show off the smooth scaling effect, which again is tremendous here. Ballblazer would later grace the Atari 7800 Pro system, and that version I feel is almost on par with this 8-bit version, but the 7800 version lacks this cool opening sequence that you get with the 8-bit versions, which I rather like. Ballblazer has one song, the Song of the Grid I believe it's called, and it's an incredibly catchy and rhythmic theme that sticks with you long after the fact. During gameplay, a steady drum beat complements the ambiance of humming barriers, soaring rotofoils, smacking balls, and unique goal jingles for each player. It's not much, but it gets the job done and it's nice and pleasant. Overall, Ballblazer is a tremendous futuristic sports game thing on the Atari 8-bit range that isn't a port of some other pre-existing arcade title. It's visually stunning for its day and age, has an overall great presentation, and most of all, is a devilishly simple and smooth game that's an absolute blast to play. This is a game well worth checking out, not only on the 8-bit computers, but also the Atari 7800 version of Ballblazer is comparably excellent, and there's also a Famicom version that's kinda trash, I wouldn't bother with that version. But this version is great. Fun game, good times, no complaints.